Hello and welcome back, this is ProTaleDev, back with another Dungeon Farm Tycoon game. Now, continuing our development, what we're going to be looking at is kind of the different things that I've done over time in the last week or so. I did take a little bit of a week break, I had some things to do, but I'm back now and I started working on this again. And let's just show you what we've got so far. So first of all, what I'm going to show is I now have a new script. I have a new script called Object Counter. So this is an object counter script. All it's doing is counting how many objects are in the scene, just so that I know how many there are, and it's just nice for me as the developer to know these type of things. I can expand this script to allow lots of other different things like more dungeon rooms, more monsters, which will be another one, and kind of extra things like that. And it's just a little bit of way of me observing how many are objects in the scene. So another thing that I've done is I've changed the global light intensity. So now it's changed based it changes based on the time of day. So if I quickly play this, I've also given myself a lot more money to start off with, just so I don't have to keep changing it and coming out. So if I do this, and then I just wait a little bit, and as you can see now, we just put it back at normal speed. As you can see, it gets dark, and then what happens is the lights now turn on for both our cursor and our adventurers. So now whenever it gets dark, the lights will come on for these adventurers and you'll be able to see them, you'll be able to click on them. Wasn't too sure if I'll do the same for buildings, but we'll see. And this I think just adds a little bit more to the environment and a little bit more to the overworld. Of course, it needs to be improved on, but for now I'm happy with how it works. Obviously, I decided to script it and to code it inside of the time manager, because that's where time is managed anyway. Time is controlled. Another thing to quickly mention is down here we have the health. This is actually for the player when they're inside of the dungeon. So they're going to have a certain amount of health, and depending on the percentage, as they lose health, they will lose hearts. Very simple and straightforward coding, so nothing too complicated. Like I said, it's just a percentage based system, and I can always increase the amount of health, but because I've coded it so that it's based on percentage it loses, I can just change how much health the player has in overall, which is quite nice for later on when I make it so that the player can add on health to their overall hearts. Now before we move on, actually what I'm going to do is, so let's show off that percentage change now. So if I go in my player and then go into their health, which is just tracked here, what I can do is I can slowly bring down the percentage, and you should see the hearts slowly go away as I get further and further down. There you go, and then if I hit 0, it restarts. That'll probably change as well. There'll probably be like a lose screen, and you'll be transported outside of the dungeon, but maybe you'll lose all the coins you got throughout. We'll see how that works later. I do want something like that. So next thing I want to show is I want to talk about the monsters that are now in the shop. So let's just go in big screen. So yeah, I want to show off the monsters that are now in the shop. So they're completed now. So we have our different monsters. At the moment the text isn't different. That's down here, which is describing, which we'd worked on before in the past. I haven't updated that yet, but basically these monsters now have different names and different effects, and we do also, I think it's a good thing to mention, is that I now have a scroll bar so on the shop itself, so we can scroll down now if we wanted to, so we can add more buildings in, and this will be important later when we add more rooms and things like that. But for now you can see it, that it works with the monsters. These, like I said, these all have unique names and effects, and I'll be showing that off probably in a later video. But for now I'll just show you that you can put them in the dungeon. So let's close this off a second, and what we're going to do is we're going to go into the dungeon. So once we go into the dungeon, you'll notice a few changes, a few differences. The first is that we're going to, you can see these like icons that are next to the sides of each dungeon piece, so exits, and these are the the same thing as we saw in the previous videos. They're the locks, they're just different icons. The colour indicates what connection point status it is. So if it's yellow, it means that it's not connected to anything and it's most likely going to spawn a lock. What we're going to do is we're going to put in a different broom, and if you put it in the right position, it should turn green, and if you put it in the right position, it should turn green when you spawn it, which it did. And that means that it can now be spawned and used. So we got the same thing for our different rooms. Now again, this is a good mention to say that I have done lots of different rooms. There are still a few issues, but for the most part this is done. So if we just spawn in another room here, you can see that it connects. Do the same thing here, and as you can see, it is all working. Now of course the normal default ones still work, and if it connects right, it will turn green. So it's a little bit of a nice thing to see. Now of course, if we exit the dungeon, it will all be fixed and finished. It will all be it'll start to generate the locks, and we'll be able to play it as a player. So let's do that. So start adventure. And now we're inside of the dungeon. So the immediate thing you're going to notice is that the shadows aren't as bad as they were before. They're still not great, but I did my best to try and fix them and try and get a favourable result. And I think I did okay with that. I'm probably going to do a little bit more work on the shadows. They don't really work as well as you'd expect them to. It's partly to do with the fact that the shadow casts don't really interact well when they're spawned in prefabs. When the shadow casts are interacting with another shadow cast, it kind of doesn't work with that kind of separate prefab. It has to be in the same hierarchy, and it doesn't really work at the moment. But it is experimental, so I'm hopeful that they will fix that. The other thing is that we're also using normal maps for our textures, so you'll see that the environment looks a little bit more detailed, a little bit more depth to it, and that is because of the normal maps. Now we've got these lots of these extra rooms, so we've got small rooms, large rooms, long vertical rooms. We've also got like a lava pit room, which you saw me place down a minute ago. Let's go to there. Now it's not completely finished, of course. There's still a lot to do, and there's still a lot of rooms that I've got to work on. There's still a little bit of issues with them, but for the most part, that's pretty good. Now if I quickly go back to end and then create dungeon again, and then I go to our monsters, you'll see that we do have our monsters again. Now we can spawn them in. So as you see, we got our mud monster there, we got a mass goblin we can spawn in. Now what I'm actually doing is not spawning in the monster itself. What I'm actually doing is spawning in spawn points, and when we actually start the adventure, they will be able to attack and kill the player, but will probably be stationed in specific rooms. Of course we can delete the rooms and the monsters will still stay there, but, and the chances are what I'll do is I'll delete them if we click end adventure, or maybe I'll allow players to actually delete them. So that's what I've done so far. It isn't crazy. I've been a little bit busy, so I've not been able to work on this, but that's what I've got so far. So hopefully next time I'll be working on the monsters a little bit more and finishing the rooms, specifically like getting them working, and I'll take it from there. So this has been ProTaleDev, and I'll see you next time.